Hello and welcome to This Week in Bitcoin with a new setting. I'm trying some things around here. But nevertheless, we're getting into the news now. There's a lot that happened this week. The ECB lowered rates, the Fed lowered rates, everyone sort of panicked and then was left to believe like, oh, okay, it's actually not this bad. We've got some news out of Bhutan, the small kingdom in Asia. We've got news from El Salvador. We've got news from Blackrock. Apparently, Donald Trump is now buying burgers with Bitcoin. It's been a busy week. But let's kick the news off with the ECB because they were actually the first central bank again to move with a lower interest rate plan, sort of. They lowered the rates by 25 basis points to, on average, 3.5%. There's some inflation dates and numbers there where they're lowering the rates to actually go under 3.5%, and then in others it's a bit above that. So the average is around 3.5%. And they did this for two reasons. They're seeing a move back to normality, they called it, although it's not really, because everything is still more expensive than it was before, and inevitably their plans really were miserable and failed. Okay, we'll leave that out of the door. But very surprisingly, they said we're moving in the right direction, very close to the 2% inflation goal, but on the other hand, we do know that whatever we're doing now will mean that we will have higher inflation at the end of this year, potentially in the beginning of next year, which is a very interesting way of saying either we're going to print a lot of money again, causing inflation, or whatever we're planning now is only a short-term fix, and we're not certain if it will stick. So they said we expect to have higher inflation, not high, but higher inflation next year again. But if we do everything right and you guys follow along, we should be back to 2% by 2026. So for the next 2 years, we don't know what's going to happen, according to the ECB. And the markets also reacted very poorly, I would say, because most of them realized like, yeah, this is not going to work out. So instead, they looked over to the States, where everyone was waiting in huge anticipation this week for Jerome Powell to probably say the most expensive good morning or good afternoon, because he also announced rate cuts. For the first time in 4 years, he did lower the key interest rate by 50 basis points, basically nuking everything because everyone was anticipating a 25 basis point drop. And he again went the different way. There's literally a good meme. I'm not going to state it now, but I think most people know it, where he goes F your puts or your bits, so depending which angle you're coming from, and then does the exact opposite of what you expect him to do. With this move, they are now lowering their rates, basically implying it should help the market, it should ease the pain in the system, because according to them, job reports are actually not as bad. Yeah, of course, if everyone has 3 jobs because they need to survive somehow, because inflation is so bad, because of your previous situation and your previous decisions, the reports don't look that bad. But nevertheless, these reports are good enough. We want to lower the rates to, give some leverage in the market. But then on the other hand, they're also expecting to not reach the key inflation goal too fast, because whatever they've been doing for the last 14 months on paper reduced the inflation by only 0.1%. So is this a signal that the money printer is going to turn back on? Who knows? But looking at the past to decide the future, you could say, yeah, they will probably print again. Whether that's good or bad for Bitcoin, that remains to be seen. But we will definitely see some further announcements from the Fed. And who knows, maybe the lowering of the interest rate for once does solve the problem. I very much doubt it though. Then we also had some news out of Bhutan, the very small kingdom in Asia. It's sort of squeezed in between Bangladesh, India, and Tibet, China. And for the longest time, people didn't know about this place in association with Bitcoin, but due to the Celsius and BlockFi mishaps in 2022, people actually found out like, oh, they have Bitcoin. They've been mining Bitcoin because they are a hydro-powered country where all of their energy comes from hydro. They actually have a lot of Bitcoin there. And how are they using it? They did put it into Celsius and BlockFi to get yield on it. Obviously, that wasn't a smart decision. And rather, they realized through this, if we already have this abundance in energy, why are we not just using it and mining Bitcoin ourselves, putting it on the balance sheet of Drug Holding, which is a state-powered holding company that does all of the financials for the kingdom, and use it this way to basically get exposure and use a disinflationary asset that increases our purchasing power over time to get more out of it. Long story short, that's what they've been doing. They've now partnered with Bitdeer to increase their mining operation to 500 megawatts, planning on actually going further than that. Instead of selling energy to other companies and basically having a cash burn, because it was never really that lucrative, they're now using Bitcoin for two reasons: to gain attraction on tourism's end, and on the other hand, to also use the asset more strategically as a treasure reserve asset. Does that mean that Bhutan is sort of following along El Salvador and introducing legal tender? We don't know yet. What's interesting to see is, though, that this small kingdom has 2.5 times more Bitcoin, 13,029 to be exact, than El Salvador. And El Salvador has been very public, very aggressive about their stance. But we can actually verify that Bhutan is owning these Bitcoin because they're on the balance sheet of the company, and the company has been going through rigorous audits and stuff to verify that they're the sole owner of this. And looking at how strategic that company, in the name of Bhutan, is actually leveraging their Bitcoin, and I'm not talking about trading or anything, but they're doing partnerships with Bitdeer, they're doing partnerships with energy companies to actually increase the awareness of what Bitcoin can do for a country. This could actually have the bigger effect than what we've seen in El Salvador. Speaking of El Salvador, we also had some news this week where Nayib Bukele said that he's going to release the government budget for 2025, and in it there will be absolutely no debt. They have a lot of cash flow, they're cash flow positive, they want to increase tourism, they want to use a lot of the profit that they're going to generate going forward to actually pay back their loans they still have with the Chinese National Bank. It's sort of the Asian counterpart to the IMF, if you want to say so, because they've gotten rid of the loans from the IMF. They just took a small loan from the Chinese and want to pay this back as fast as possible to be one of the first countries in Central America to be debt-free, self-sustaining, and offering lucrative business dealings and lucrative government dealings for outsiders to come into the country. Now, the interesting part is this down to Bitcoin in El Salvador? Has this solved all of these issues? One might say so. I've been there myself. I've seen that the adoption is going along. Not as fast as we all want, obviously, but it is there. And it has brought a lot with it. Tourism, you see more people going there. You see El Salvadorians going back to their home country who've previously fled due to the civil war and the gang wars. And also, you've seen that increase in business interest. So whatever Nayib Bukele is doing there, it's been working. I would be curious to see all of these Bitcoin holdings. Are they actually verifiable? Are they really stacking 1 Bitcoin a day? But that maybe is a thing for the future. But for now, he's doing an amazing job. And if he's actually going to release the budget without any debt next year, and they can actually hold true to that word and don't produce any debt in that year, that will be an amazing first step. And considering that the country just 5 years ago was rated one of the worst countries in the world to be in and one of the most dangerous, to now being debt-free, that is a huge arc and something I'm sure every citizen in El Salvador will appreciate. And then lastly, the news, and it's really the last part because it's a long video today. We have Blackrock who released a Bitcoin report from their research department, which is going out with their sales managers for next year as well, where they actually stated a lot of great information. Firstly, they really got the network effects, how is Bitcoin performing against gold, stocks, indexes and stuff during crisis, during extreme money printing, during extreme situations. And the really surprising part was you had a lot of great graphics where it shows how much Bitcoin dropped after a bull market, how this number is decreasing, how it's disinflationary, and all of these positive points we've been known to read on Bitcoin research papers and whatever. They've actually done a great job. Considering that all of these sales managers can now go out with this information and pitch it to clients, we might see that this is actually sort of a Trojan horse where people who are smart enough to look at this research and go like, okay, if I want to invest, let's say 10 million into an ETF, why don't I invest 5 million into the ETFs and just 5 million into the asset outright? Because I can save all of the costs of the ETF and I can really have the bearer asset with me. And considering that this performance is a great thing for, I don't know, crises in whatever part of the world, or crisis in hyperinflation in the local currency, in the market you're in, or whatever, I can actually split this, and due to this research BlackRock is providing, we could actually use this in orange pilling more of these investors quickly. And with that, we're finally at the end of this week in Bitcoin. A lot of stuff happened this week. I'm sorry about the long video. But nevertheless, you know the drill. If you got questions, feedback, just want to say hello, leave a comment below. And I look forward to seeing you next week again.